Make sure I'm recording. I am. All right, cool. Real YouTubist, study the type chart. Which combination is the strongest of all? So, there I was, reflecting on my YouTube channel and thinking about what kind of content I wanted to make next. I remembered that a while ago I had done a video where I ranked all of the Pokemon types individually, and that people really enjoyed it. So I thought to myself, what if we took this one step further? What if we asked not which type was the strongest on its own, but which two types are the strongest when combined? Before I jump into this video, I would like to ask you to subscribe if you haven't already. Only about 1% of my viewers are subscribed, and it breaks my little heart. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's talk about how to tackle this question. Hello, so I'm interrupting the video to bring you the announcement that today's video is sponsored by Manscaped. For anyone who doesn't know already, Manscaped is a company that specializes in razors that are useful for not just your face, to say the least. I am a man myself who, of course, uses razors. Manscaped was kind enough to send me their Performance Package 4.0, so I got to use some of the products in there. I tried out the razor myself personally, and I shave my beard, trim my beard about once a week, and I could definitely feel the difference in quality between this and what I was using before. I've always kind of just bought cheap electric razors and then kind of used them for probably a bit longer than I should, and so, yeah, I'm a guy who needs to use razors, and Manscaped is one of the best in the business for this specific niche. So if this sounds interesting to you and it seems like something you might want to use for yourself, you can get 20% off, free international shipping, and 2 free gifts if you use my promo code in the description and also pinned in the comments down below. Thanks again to Manscaped for sponsoring. The first thing I wanted to do was to set some criteria for myself. I wanted to know the best possible type combination, but this question is hard to answer in a vacuum. I decided to start by making some assumptions. First, we have to consider what is strongest both offensively and defensively. This means that even if a combination has a ton of resistances, it might not necessarily make our list. We also won't assume anything about the coverage of the Pokemon themselves, aside from assuming they have usable stab moves of whichever types they are. Defensively, we'll consider the weaknesses, resistances, and immunities of our combinations. Offensively, we'll look at individual types that can be hit for super effective, and consider shared, not very effective moves. Lastly, there's a few things we won't consider at all. Since this is a theoretical combination, it wouldn't make much sense to consider a metagame, as that is an extremely fluid concept. Additionally, we won't consider these types when paired with abilities, so stuff like Fire and Steel with Levitate is off the table. Lastly, and this is probably obvious, but we won't make any assumptions about the stats of these Pokemon. So, now that we have our groundwork laid out, where should we begin? Well, to me it made sense to take a look at the Pokemon that have the strongest types individually, primarily Steel, Fairy, and Dragon. I next considered types that are very strong in one aspect at the cost of being less well-rounded, such as Ghost types offensively. With these types as the starting point, I began considering potential type combinations. This is where things get a bit interesting, as some of the combinations I found to be strong were not exactly intuitive. Some types that are some of the worst in the game on their own actually become quite potent when paired with the proper corresponding type. One example of this is the Bug type, which is notoriously awful on its own, but actually has really nice defensive typing when paired with the Steel type. Additionally, combining 2 mediocre types, or in this case one above average and one below average type, could also create some powerful synergy. My favorite example of this is Poison and Dark. On their own, neither of these types stands out too much, but put them together and you have a Pokemon with only one weakness, a handful of resistances, and decent type coverage. One thing I noticed when going through this process was that the types I thought might be the strongest pairings were often one type that's shown defensively, and one type that was stronger offensively. If I had to take a guess as to why, I'd say it's probably because of diminishing marginal returns. I now had a decent idea of where to start. I created a list for myself of every possible combination that I thought could be in the running, and began to whittle them down. In the end, I created a top 5 list, but before we jump into that, I'd like to give some honorable mentions. First, Steel and Dragon. This combination combines 2 of the strongest types in the game, and has a boatload of resistances. With only 2 weaknesses, an immunity, 9 resistances, and a built-in check to the Fairy Pokemon that Dragon types typically struggle with, you might expect this combination to make the list. However, despite being great defensively, offensively I didn't think this combination had enough going to justify a top 5 placement. Dragon is a great type at hitting things for neutral, but one of its major weaknesses is the inability to hit opposing Steel types, which this combo doesn't improve. Also, most players use Steel-type Pokemon in part to gain a defensive tool against the Fairy type, which you lose when you combine it with Dragon. There are two notable Steel Dragon Pokemon already, Dialga and Duraludon, and though they have their niches in VGC from time to time, they're both often underwhelming for reasons that are at least in part due to their typing. I'm going to give an honorable mention here to nearly every Steel type dual typing here, because defensively Steel is one of the absolute best types you could pair another type with. Steel Grass, Ghost, Water, Flying, and Bug were all dual types I considered when I initially made my list, despite them not making the cut. Steel is probably the best type to pair with any random type. My next honorable mention goes to a type combination with incredible offensive potency, which is Ice and Ground. There were a few combinations I considered for this spot, Ghost and Fighting and Electric and Ice for example. I settled on Ground and Ice here because the coverage is especially good. Ground types struggle against Grass and Flying types, and Ice types fail to hit Fire and Steel, which Ground covers. Defensively, this combination is rather weak, in large part due to the Ice type, but it's still a good pairing even given the number of weaknesses if your goal is to do damage. I mentioned this one earlier, but our next honorable mention goes to Poison and Dark. These two combine to provide 4 resistances and an immunity in exchange for a simple 2x weakness to Ground. On a Pokemon with good stats, such as Alolan Muck, this typing can be very strong. However, it failed to make the list because offensively the coverage is nowhere near as impressive. Our last honorable mention goes to Water and Ground, a very popular combination. While these types combine to provide resistances to Fire, Steel, Rock, and Poison in addition to an Electric immunity, the 4x weakness to Grass is a bit severe, especially given both types are resisted by Grass. Having a Water type that is immune to electric attacks is strong, and having a Ground type that isn't weak to Water and Ice is valuable as well, so this typing was probably the closest to making it onto my list. With the honorable mentions out of the way, let's talk about the real heavy hitters. Coming in at number 5, we have a typing that will look familiar to anyone who's played competitive Pokemon, Ground and Flying.
No. Wait.
Landorus's typing is especially powerful. Ground is one of the better types offensively in the game, and there's only 3 types that resist it, Grass, Bug, and Flying. By adding your own Flying typing in, you get super effective damage against 2 of those types and a neutral attacking type against the 3rd. Flying, on the other hand, is resisted by Electric, Rock, and Steel, all of which Ground does super effective damage against. There is no individual type in the game that can resist both Ground and Flying. If your opponent only has one type, you're guaranteed to be hitting it for at least neutral damage. Additionally, you eliminate Ground's weakness to Grass and Flying's weakness to Electric and Rock with this combination. The reason Ground Flying isn't higher up on our list is because that's where a lot of the magic stops. You're still weak to Water, which is never good, and unfortunately, in exchange for this potent offensive pairing, you receive a 4x weakness to Ice. Having only 2 weaknesses isn't a bad thing, but 4x weaknesses can be debilitating, so Flying and Ground settles in at a comfortable 5th place finish. Our next type is another one that will probably seem familiar if you followed Pokemon during the last few years, Fairy and Water. This pairing, most commonly associated with Tapu Fini, is strong both offensively and defensively. Adding the Fairy typing to a Water Pokemon only adds a Poison weakness to the existing Electric and Grass ones, and you're able to boast 6 resistances and an immunity in exchange. The specific resistances are often types that are popular too, with Fighting, Fire, Water, Ice, Dark, and Dragon all seeing play in most VGC metagames. Offensively, Water is actually quite strong, having only 3 resistances in Water, Grass, and Dragon. With Fairy typing, you hit Dragon for super effective and the others for neutral. Fairy is another typing with only 3 resistances in Poison, Steel, and Fire. Water allows you to hit Fire types for super effective damage and the others for neutral damage. Lastly, the types this combination can deal super effective damage against are some of the best in the game: Fire, Ground, Dark, Dragon, Rock, and Fighting. Water and Fairy are an extremely well-balanced pairing that allow for strong options both offensively and defensively. Coming in at number 3, we have our first type that doesn't actually exist at the moment in the games, Fairy and Ground. Offensively, this combo is just so brutal. Fairy and Ground individually are 2 of the strongest types in the game when it comes to doing damage, and when you consider that all 3 of the types that resist Fairy are hit for super effective by Ground, you can see why these 2 types work so well together. In 2016 and 2019's VGC formats, the most popular restricted duo was Xerneas and Primal Groudon, in large part because they were so incredibly threatening when paired together. Nearly every Pokemon most people wanted to use to check Xerneas would themselves be countered by Primal Groudon. Not only that, but in combination, these 2 types deal super effective damage against 8 of the 18 types, and I would say 7 out of 8 of those are popular picks. While they do have 4 total weaknesses, this combination also gets 4 resistances and immunities to both Electric and Dragon. To be honest, I kind of hope they never actually make a Pokemon with this typing. In our number 2 spot, we have another typing that doesn't currently exist, Ghost and Normal. This might seem like an odd inclusion at such a high spot at first, but let's look a little deeper. Ghost is a really interesting type. Offensively, only Dark and Normal can resist the attacks. Defensively, it only has two weaknesses, Ghost and Dark. Additionally, Ghost is the only type that has not one but two immunities, Normal and Fighting. Normal, on the other hand, is arguably the weirdest type in the game. It has one immunity to Ghost, 0 resistances, and only a weakness to Fighting. When you pair these two unusual types together, you wind up with something interesting. Remember Normal's weakness to Fighting? Well, Ghost is immune to that. And remember how Ghost is weak to other ghosts? Well, Normal is immune to that. What you end up with is a Pokemon with 3 immunities, 2 almost useless resistances, and only 1 weakness to Dark. Where this combination shines, however, is in the offense. Ghost is one of the absolute best types at hitting things for neutral damage, making it very difficult to switch into. Remember, the only 2 types that Ghost is resisted by are Normal and Dark. Pairing Ghost with Normal allows neutral coverage against every single individual type, with no overlapping resistances. This is a type combination that can really shine offensively, and with the most resistances possible on a single Pokemon, could also have use defensively in theory. We've made it to our number 1 spot. Before I reveal what I think is the absolute best possible Pokemon type combination, let me know what you think is going to win it all in the comments down below. Ready? Alright, let's talk about the best possible type combination in Pokemon.
Here we go!
It's Fairy Steel. Probably not super surprising. Fairy and Steel were 2 of the types I put in the S tier on my typing tier list, and they work together extremely well. Defensively, these are 2 of the best types in the game. You get 9 resistances and 2 immunities with only 2 weaknesses. You also get one of the best offensive types in the game, Fairy, paired with the single best defensive type in the game, Steel. Weaknesses to Fire and Ground aren't ideal, of course, but with such good defensive typing, it is very manageable. Steel and Fairy do not have perfect offensive coverage. They both struggle to hit Steel and Fire types. However, Steel and Fire share a weakness to Ground, giving some direction for partners typing. Something interesting about this type combination is that there have been 3 Pokemon that have been legal in VGC at one point or another who have this combination: Zacian, Mawile, and Klefki. Of these, Zacian and Mawile have been arguably the best Pokemon of the format at one point or another, with Zacian being the best restricted for parts of Series 8 and Series 10, and Mawile being the most popular Mega Evolution at 2014 Worlds and even seeing use in 2016. Even though Klefki has a lot of things to be desired, I actually used it twice at regionals and managed to finish in the top 4 at one of those. Now, to be clear, Zacian and Mawile have a lot more going for them than just their typing. It helps that their abilities make their attacks do unreasonable amounts of damage. That being said, I think it's absolutely fair to say that their typing was a large contributor as to why they are as good as they are. And that's my full list. This was actually a lot more difficult than I anticipated to make, but it was a lot of fun too. If you want to see more content like this, let me know in the comment section down below. It's me. World Chip difference, baby.